For all the comparisons between Anthony Edwards and Michael Jordan, Luka Doncic may have just taken it personally, as in games 1 and 2 against the Wolves, he put up 2 30-point masterclasses. And in game 2, we may have just witnessed the best game of his career. 32 points, 10 rebounds, and 13 assists, while hitting the single most important shot of the playoffs so far. That's what Luka Doncic just did to the Minnesota Timberwolves, as the Mavericks now take a 2-0 series lead back to Dallas. The Mavs just exposed the best defense in the NBA with a relentless paint onslaught, as they outscored Minnesota by 36 points over the first 2 games of the series, and this is how they did it. In game 1, Minnesota played a drop coverage all game long against Luka and Kyrie, which in the pick and roll allowed them to carve up the defense for easy mid-range opportunities. Here, Luka gets in front of McDaniels, and with no help coming from Rudy, he puts him in jail, hitting a virtually uncontested mid-range jumper. And this was not the only time this happened, as Luka would do this over and over again like he was playing 2K. But that is simply just how easy the game comes to Luka Doncic. So coming into game 2, the Wolves made a change, at times blitzing the screen, and it worked to an extent, but even with this kind of coverage, Luka can still make a pass like this.
So far, Minnesota +2, and Minnesota is +9 from 3.
But what the blitzing did do was force the big, whether it was Gafford or Lively, to make a pass to an open shooter. And over the first 2 games for the Mavericks, the outside shooters were not making their shots. During the 6-game series against the Thunder, it was PJ Washington who shot over 45% from 3. But in game 2, Washington shot 0 of 4. And Jones, who was also huge in the Thunder series, was only able to make 1 out of his 5 attempts. Even though the Timberwolves defense was getting stops using a blitz, for whatever reason they couldn't fully let go of that drop coverage, and when they used it, Luka and Kyrie feasted, getting virtually whatever they wanted. Even as a casual spectator, it would have been blatantly obvious that Minnesota should have stopped using the drop coverage, as once Luka puts his defender in jail, it's a 2-on-1 against Rudy Gobert, and sure, he's the defensive player of the year, but no defender can guard Luka and protect the rim from a lob threat at the same time. Here, Luka draws Gobert out, and once he leaves his assignment, Luka makes a perfect pass for an easy 2. What makes this even worse for Minnesota is when Luka's not on the floor, you still don't get a break, as Kyrie Irving is just as elite in these kinds of situations, here yet again drawing Rudy out and then making the pass to Gafford for 2. The game virtually turned into a dunk fest, with Luka or Kyrie making the same play every single time when they get in the pick and roll, either hitting a mid-range shot or throwing an alley-oop pass. But when you actually see the level of difficulty on some of these passes, it's incredible. But the truth is, they can virtually make these in their sleep. Minnesota went from defending the greatest inside threat in the league to arguably the greatest offensive backcourt in the history of the NBA. Even though the final stat line for Kyrie in game 2 doesn't look all that good, in the 4th quarter he was sensational. Here he surveys the defense and decides just to shoot over Conley and connects on his first 3-pointer of the series. Then after Edwards turns the ball over, he again just shoots, but this time it's over the 7-footer Naz Reid, who contests the shot about as well as you can, but it simply doesn't matter. Then in transition, Gobert gets cross-matched with Kyrie and tries to communicate a switch with Edwards. Unfortunately, he either doesn't hear him or doesn't notice, but Luka sure does, making a pass out of a double team to Kyrie, who connects on a 29-footer. Then again with the high pick and roll, Irving draws 4 defenders, leaving Gafford all by himself under the basket. The Mavericks could have had JaVale McGee out there and it would have been the same result. Plays like this are so demoralizing, not only for the defense, but the Minnesota crowd too, as once you take the crowd out of a road playoff game, it makes a huge difference. But then on the very next play, it was Naz Reid who made his 7th 3-pointer of the game. Then Dallas go right back to bullying Gobert, as here Luka fakes the shot to draw Rudy to contest, and then he simply just dumps it off for Gafford for 2 again. The Mavericks went to this over and over and over again, and even when Minnesota made a run to extend the lead out to 3, Kyrie responded with this.
Shot clock at 6, dancing, driving, feeding,
Again, Minnesota wasn't able to stop the onslaught of alley-oops, and even once he lost the ball, he still manages to put it on time and on target for Derek Lively. Then Kyrie channels his inner Steph Curry, as once Luka is doubled with only 3 seconds left, every Timberwolves defender has their eyes on Doncic, as McDaniels loses Kyrie for only a second, but that's enough time for Irving to spring open in the corner for his 4th 3 in the quarter. Then Minnesota's defense finally sends bodies at Doncic, as Reid and Gobert communicated a switch perfectly, as they boxed out Lively and forces Doncic to miss the shot. Then it's the big man who was robbed of an all-rookie first team, as Derek Lively picks up the biggest stop of the season, forcing Anthony Edwards into a turnover. Then down 2 with 13 seconds to work, Lively sets a perfect screen, forcing Minnesota to switch Rudy on Doncic. Then with a couple crossovers and a step back, Luka creates enough space to put the finishing touches on a historic performance. The Mavericks just did what Minnesota did to Denver, taking a 2-0 lead back home. And as as we saw only a week ago, even after Denver were able to win 3 straight games, Minnesota still ended up bouncing back to win the series. With that in mind, Minnesota have been excellent on the road in the playoffs, winning 5 out of their 6 games on the road. Because of the Wolves' outstanding road record, the Mavericks cannot take the foot off the gas, but what makes this even more troubling for Minnesota is the Mavericks' record of coming off of losses. So far in this postseason run, the Mavericks are undefeated in games that follow a loss, as they truly are a resilient team that makes adjustments. But perhaps even more impressive is Kyrie Irving's record in closeout games, which still stands at 14-0. With the Mavericks extremely unlikely to give up this lead, could they beat Boston in the NBA Finals? Let me know in the comments below.